the show today, and the entire show kind of got flipped on its head about 20 minutes before our recording because we got a text message that the Big Ten was going to be releasing the schedule for what, Jared? The next 5 seasons?
24 through 28. So technically 5 seasons.
5 seasons, home and away. We don't have dates; those will come at a later time. But nonetheless, we know the matchups now for the next 5 seasons. If it wasn't real before, it now is officially real now, guys, because we know opponents, we know where games are being located, and we know distances that Oregon's going to have to travel. It's an exciting, different time for Oregon football.
How awesome is this? Just to look at this, and as Matt says, this like really puts it like this is concrete. 1 year away. This is what Oregon will be doing. These are the road trips you have to plan for, and it's a really fun start to be. I mean, two of the like venues I think we've talked about being most excited about were Michigan and Wisconsin, and Oregon gets those right off the bat in 2024, along with Purdue and UCLA on the road. And I'm sure I don't want to run through every single game matchup because that would be a lot to go over. That would be 45 games to discuss. There will be stories on duckterritor.com. I'm sure if you want, you can just go to big10.org, and it has a really nice printout of each of the 5 seasons and every single matchup and all of the different by team. So that's worth taking a look at. It's actually a very easy graphic to look at. But I just am excited that like this is tangible. We're here. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about some stuff later in the podcast with the 23 season because this season is still ongoing and very exciting as well. But yeah, here we are, and you get a sense of what this will look like. And I guess just one of my initial reactions is that we talked about the possibility of maybe playing only teams in the West or playing all 3 teams on the West Coast every year. That is not the case. Oregon will play, I think, about 2 every single season, sometimes 3. But they will get an incredible tour of Big Ten country right off the bat, like I said. And then in 2025, it gets real from a travel perspective. This is going to put a lot of, I think, stress on the travel budget of Oregon fans going to Iowa, Northwestern, Penn State, and Rutgers. That is 2 trips all the way across the country. So we'll see, I think, in 25 just how committed the fan base is to checking out other parts of the country. But boy, right off the bat here, opening with Michigan and Wisconsin in the same season on the road, hosting Ohio State that year. I mean, there's a lot to like here in terms of this initial 24 schedule in particular.
Yeah, the 24 schedule is really cool. You get Maryland, you get Illinois, who like Oregon, they don't really have a history with either of those schools. And then you host the big dogs in Michigan State, Ohio State, and then Washington as well. And heading on the road like this, this is just kind of what you expect. I mean, when you join the Big Ten, all the other schools are on the other side of the country. So this schedule through the next 5 years is about what you would expect in terms of the travel. Erik, you are right, though. Like 25 kind of stinks for Oregon since it's at Rutgers, at Penn State. 27 is an interesting one as well, at Maryland. And then 28, I think, is a pretty nice home slate. Rutgers gets to come out to Autzen Stadium for the first time ever, along with Illinois, Michigan, USC, and Washington. So I think it's nice that the Big Ten has also like kept together the West Coast schools. I haven't checked Washington's schedule, but there is 1 year here where Oregon does play all 3 West Coast schools. That's 2026, 2 at home, 1 on the road. But like Erik, like you said, they do play at least 2 West Coast schools in every single year, which is really helpful in terms of recruiting kids to your school for any of the 4 programs. Like, yeah, if you're Oregon, like maybe you don't get to have X games at home, but you can go down and say, hey, look, we're going to play at UCLA this year. Like that's just down the road from maybe where this kid lives, or it's still within driving distance for a lot of them. So that helps in the recruiting end. But to get these big name matchups to come out to Autzen Stadium on a regular basis is going to be incredibly exciting. Like 2027 is going to have Ohio State and Penn State. Like that's just fun. Like at the end of the day, I think we all talked about this. Whenever the last time we talked about the Big Ten was, it's just how fun this is going to be in terms of getting to see these new schools on a week to week basis, almost a day to day. But that's not how football works. Like you get used to the Pac-12 teams, like it's Washington State again. Oh, Oregon State, like that's obviously the big game. But Cal, Stanford, like you get used to it. Now these are completely different teams that you see from afar, from the Pac-12 and West Coast perspective. But now you're going to be right on top of it when they come to Autzen Stadium every week for the next, 7 years during the Big Ten media deal.
2024 for Oregon features 8 home football games out of 13 games. Because I just went and looked out. What does this do from an impact of a future non-conference schedule? And remember, they play at Hawaii 24th of August on the road. And then they get Idaho, Texas Tech, and Boise State all at home, plus 5 conference games. So next season, there will be some travel. Yes, no doubt. They'll be traveling all the way to Hawaii, and then later in the year, they'll be traveling as far as Wisconsin, Purdue, and Michigan. But 8 home games. That hasn't happened. I think it has at one point when the league played, the Pac-12 played 4 non-conference games, but it's only happened maybe once or twice in program history. I haven't looked yet at other games down the road, but I do know in 2025, just 6 home games total for Oregon because they do have a non-conference game on the road at Boise State. Does that game get played, guys? Like, knowing you have to play 6 road games in league play, or 6 total road games.
It's
right
5 in league play.
5 league play. Like, Oregon shouldn't play that Boise State game. Like, there's no reason to.
Well, might not be up to Oregon.
Well, they can definitely get out if they wanted to, I guess.
They can cancel. They just have to pay a fee.
I would say, though, at least it's Boise State, and it's not like this was a year they were scheduled to play across the country somewhere. That's a pretty quick, easy flight. It's not a home game. Obviously, you want to have as many home games as possible, to your point, Matt. But at least it's somewhat regional, which is, I think, what you need to do. And this is the hard part of when you change conference affiliations, and especially when you schedule out non-conference games so far in advance, is that the benefit here – or the goal here probably should be to play almost all of your non-con games in West Coast time, you know what I mean, in this time zone. It's because you are going to now have to travel across the country. So there are some situations here where Oregon will be playing, significant games, obviously in Big Ten country, while also having a game or two, mostly just one every year, that isn't super close. Fortunately, in 25, at least Boise State's reasonably regional. To your point, Matt, though, like, I don't know what the outcome of canceling that game is, other than maybe you would swap it for a game against like a Pac-12 team at home, but I don't know exactly. Or formerly a Pac-12 team, like a former conference rival at home. I don't know how likely that is, though.
I don't know how likely that would be either. It's going to be interesting to see who they do or don't keep on their non-con schedule. I kind of feel like they would keep Boise State. It's not like, I know, like only the 5 home games is a struggle, especially financially for Oregon. If they get significantly less money than they would bring in for the 8 conference or the 8 home games scheduled a year before, but I feel like Boise State's going to want that game to be played, and I wonder how much the exit fee would be for Oregon to kind of cancel that. But if the pandemic season proved anything, it's that you can make schedules like this and do it in a week or two, or do it midweek, like was it like Florida Gulf Coast or whoever that was at the time. I can't remember who it was. Chanticleer is not Florida Gulf Coast, but regardless, it's not as hard as it once seemed to go out and schedule these games. So yeah, if Oregon does cancel it or doesn't cancel it, their non-conference schedule, I'm sure over the next year will be affected some way or somehow. Maybe it's Boise State, maybe it's another team, maybe it's Hawaii, just to cut down on the travel, because that's as far of a trip. I guess that would be west as it is east. So we'll see what Oregon does from a travel perspective. But they got all this new Big Ten money going, so maybe it's not going to be a problem at all.
I think maybe the easiest solution would just be calling Boise and saying, "Hey, do you want to play at home in 2024? And we'll take you guys at our place in 2025." That would be probably the easiest solution.
Sorry, but you mean in 2025 come home, because 2024 they don't play Boise State on the road, right? Isn't it 25?
Yeah, they play Boise State at home, so they would be just swapping, just saying, "Hey, in 2024, you guys get to host us, and 2025 we'll host Boise State, as in Oregon.
Right.
That's the easiest solution, is Oregon just calling them up and just saying, let's swap these times, or in 2026 too, because they host Boise State then too. But that would present. Actually, it wouldn't be 2026, because that would mean at Boise State, at Oklahoma State to start the season. That would not fly at all. So, yes, the only solution, easy solution, would be swapping in 2024 and 2025 dates. But
right,
we're here to talk Big Ten games. I guess, is there anyone that stands out to you guys that you just can't wait to go? I mean, I think in 2024 it's got to be Wisconsin.
Michigan.
Over Michigan? Dang.
Well, I think I've never been, so yes, that one would be number one for me. But a lot of fans went to that Michigan game in 2007. So
it's a long time ago, though.
That's true.
It's 16 years. I was 10.
No, I think Michigan is the big in the first year. The two games that are really exciting, and this is probably just almost too easy, is just they go to Michigan, they host Ohio State. Like, that's really cool that you do that in the first year in the Big Ten. You get to play both of those programs. And it's a challenging schedule, because undoubtedly those are the two toughest, or at least of the traditional Big Ten teams, the two historically toughest programs. But to say you get to play both of them in one season, again, it's like, yeah, you're in the Big Ten. This is real. You are playing all the big dogs right out the gate. 24 home schedule, getting Ohio State, getting Washington's awesome. It's kind of a bummer. The other three teams right now don't look fantastic, although Maryland has had a good start to the 2023 season.
Yeah, take it easy on the Terps.
Yeah, the Terps maybe I'm being too critical, but Illinois and Michigan State haven't exactly looked incredible. And at least they're not going to Illinois right away, where there apparently are fires that are making it difficult for them to play games. I don't know if you guys saw that story that came through the wire a couple of days ago. It's interesting. No, I think in 24 it's Michigan and Ohio State. Going to Wisconsin is going to be another awesome opportunity, though, without question. It's fun. I mean, there's three games here that, like, you would talk about planning, going to, or trying to build a fall travel schedule around here,
right,
or that you get in 1 year that you would usually have over the course of 3 or 4 years. So, being part of the Big Ten allows some really fun matchups, and right out of the gate, having Michigan, having Wisconsin on the road, and then Ohio State at home, playing Washington at home, like maintaining that rivalry. It's a good schedule.
Yeah, obviously Michigan and Wisconsin are top of the list so far, but that's just year one. Year two, at Penn State, obviously could be a whiteout game, could be it's just an incredible environment there. And then the next season in 26, they're back at Ohio State. I think that would be a lot of fun. 25, they also go down to USC. It's been a little bit since 2019. That was the last time that Oregon faced USC. Well, I guess 2020 they did as well. But that was for
they go to
championship game.
USC in 26. Right? Yeah, USC in 26. Yeah, that was the conference championship game, although that was played, I believe, at USC.
Yeah. The 2025 they'll go back down to USC, and there should be fans at that time. We all hope and pray that there will be. Nebraska's go is going to be a fun trip. I think that's like obviously GBR is not doing great in terms of everything, but that's still a great place to go to. It's still one of the best fan bases in the entire country. I think all of these like every single year is just going to have like 3 or 4 great games. And it all kind of will rotate as well, depending on how good the other programs do. Like, we don't know how Illinois is going to be next year. I'd imagine that they're probably not the greatest, but every once in a while they have like pop up good years. And so that'll just add kind of these elements to each season where it's like, oh, well, we really wanted to go to Wisconsin or Minnesota, but dang, I don't know, Indiana's really good this year. Maybe we can go make that trip, or that's going to be an even better game. So obviously the big dogs, Michigan, Ohio State. I wish Michigan State was still on that list, but they've been really struggling the last couple of years. But it's still a fun environment. Like, there's just going to be great games every single season. But that Penn State game away in 2025, that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. All right, let's transition now to 2023. You guys were at media availability. Dan Lanning gave us the unfortunate probably expected news that Noah Whittington is done for the season.
Yeah, I asked him if he expected Whittington to return to play this season. He said, "I don't think that's probably going to be the case. No." As we said,
What a
expected. I think.
strange answer, by the
Yeah, I
way.
was a little
Just
bit.
like English wise.
Well, it is because it's like kind of caveating both sides of
Yeah.
it, but I think pretty clearly it's no, and we kind of heard that independently as well. And I thought Jared and I were talking about as we walked back to the car afterwards. I thought well, Bucky Irving didn't say my teammate is out for the season. He kind of let it slip with how effusive he was in his praise of Noah and kind of how like emotional he said he was and how it was going to take him some time to recover. Like you don't talk in those terms if a guy's out for like 2 to 3 weeks or something. So like there was kind of the writing was on the wall. Even Dan's immediate reaction after the Colorado game, talking about pray for Noah, said that a couple of times. I thought this was probably going to be the result. It stinks. Noah is a really great young man from all of our encounters with him. Very fun to talk to. Sometimes a little tight-lipped, but sometimes not. And a very good football player. And this puts pressure, obviously, as we've talked about before, what it was doing in the immediate aftermath of the Whittington injury. It puts pressure on Bucky Irving and Jordan James. But now that we know it's for the duration of the 23 season, it puts even more pressure on those two. So far, so good. Jordan James, new career high in rushing. Both games, by the way, that Whittington has missed, James has set one versus Portland State. He had 86 yards, and then he re-upped it to 89 this last game against Stanford. So James has looked up to par. But as Dan said, when you're down to 2 kind of experienced running backs instead of 3, that does put a little more pressure on those 2 to produce. And he did have some nice things to say about Jaden Lamar and Dante Dowdell. But as those who watched the game with Stanford last week saw, it didn't appear that the staff was quite ready to throw them out there in any meaningful snaps. So it'll be interesting to see if that changes going forward. But again, tough news here with Whittington out for the season.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a surprise. Dan has kind of tiptoed around the answer for the last week and a half, more or less. But again, like what Bucky was saying, what Dan said after the Colorado game where Noah Whittington originally got injured, like asking for prayers for Noah. Clearly it wasn't at that point wasn't going to be like a left ankle sprain. Like it was going to be more than that. And he was probably going to miss a significant portion of time. So he's out for the season. I think Erik did a good job covering that. Kyrie Jackson back at practice today.
Good news.
Yesterday. Good news. Really, well, to me, I guess to me, it was like, yes, of course he is. Because against Stanford, he was hurt. And then for the entire rest of the game, he was on the sideline, like jumping up and down and going through the motions as basically a fan of the team on the sideline. So It didn't look like he was going to be impacted at all physically for the next couple of days, but was at practice. Dan said he had a good day, whatever the heck that means. And then a fun one, special teams, Andrew Boyle might be out for the year, might not be. Dan gave a very cryptic answer. I forgot to pull it up in front of me, but he's like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
He goes, yeah, right now. And then a pause in which Jared Denny, our good friend from On 3, jumps in and says, something about Kyrie Jackson. And Dan continues to answer the question about Boyle and says, I don't know if it'll be the year, though.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like I think James Crepey of the Oregonian, he asked, like, is Andrew Boyle out for the year? And Dan goes, yeah, for now. And it's like, what the hell does that mean? Like, is he out for the season? Like, if each week is a season, like, what are we doing here? So,
anyways, just tell us the answer.
Well, my guess is it's an injury that was season-ending. I have no idea. I'm just trying to make sense of this. It was an injury that could theoretically be season injury ending, and then they've gotten some since then. There's maybe been more positive outlook or whatnot, but it was very strange to kind of yes, but maybe not. I don't know. Injuries.
All the answers other than Kyrie's were very strange. But I did see Andrew Boyle yesterday at practice, like not practicing, but like coming out of like a workout from their weight room. But I guess that's a positive direction. I guess that's why he's only out for the season at that specific moment then. But in 5 minutes, he could be back. But I think that's it from the injury perspective. We don't have any updates on Justin Jacobs. Dan did not mention him, but I'd imagine it would be the same answer that we've gotten for the last 4 weeks.
The one that I was
Yeah.
hoping we'd get, and maybe we could have obviously gotten if we would have asked, would just be something on Brian Addison, considering the matchup that's upcoming and the fact that we didn't see him at Stanford. It would be good to get some clarification on what his standing is, because game against Washington will be a game where you certainly want all hands on deck, and he's one of your better players in coverage, better safeties in terms of playing the pass.
This is in no way a slight to Noah. Getting Kyrie Jackson back is the bigger news. Like, you can, in my opinion, like, you can withstand the loss of Whittington. It hurts. It definitely hurts. But Bucky and Jordan you still have 2 of the 3 guys. Jackson's your best corner, and you're about to play the best passing team in the conference. Probably in the country.
Statistically in the country.
Yeah. So you need Jackson more than you need Whittington in this game, which is not any slight towards Whittington at all.
No, it's fair, Matt. And this isn't the only week where you really need all hands on deck in that defensive backfield, because they've got Washington State the following week. Cam Ward has been awesome. They have USC later in the season. We know they have the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. Those are 3 games among your last 7 against 3 of the better quarterbacks in the country. So they're going to be tested, and you need them. And even Arizona State, which is a game Oregon you would think should run through. Kenny Dillingham loves to throw the football. We'll see what their health situation is at quarterback. They're kind of in a weird spot right now with Rashada out and Pine playing. But we'll see. I guess we'll get a sense later in the season if that changes. But yeah, I agree, Matt. Kyrie being available was I thought really exciting and positive news for the day.
Do we want to transition now to the stock report, the midweek or mid-season update?
Sure. I mean, I'm here for it.
All right. You take over. You've got the data and the information here.
I sure do, man. Goodness. Apologies for the occasional mouse click on my end. Just got to switch over from tab to tab on this Google Sheets document. No, I don't have Microsoft Excel, and I'm very sad about it. But not a whole lot to talk about this bye week. This podcast originally was just going to be injuries in the stock report, and just kind of like our midseason thoughts on the team, which I guess theoretically we could still do after the stock report.
I think we should. Yeah.
Big Ten had some other ideas, so I'll keep this pretty short and sweet. So for those who are unfamiliar with the game, Erik, Matt, and I all got 1,000 fake dollars, monopoly money as I like to call it, to invest into players on the football team. And each player is given a share price, which is conducted through statistics and divided by games played to see how efficient they are. The more efficient or the more productive a player is in their amount of games, the higher their stock price is. So it's kind of I felt like it was a better barometer of how good a player is. It's like, well, does he have 1 game out of every 10 that's really good, or does he have 10 games that are pretty darn good? Oh, that's a loud noise over there, Matt.
Airplane.
Yeah, I'm trying to like, it's a hell.
Okay.
Goodness gracious, that was loud.
San Diego
$1,000. Yeah. $1,000 to everybody. I'll just go through the result, or should I do the picks or just the results?
Why don't you open by telling us that I don't think I'm doing very well, but why don't you tell us our individual results, then we can go through players that have had big stock raises. That seems
sure
fair.
Thing. Yeah. So after 5 weeks, Matt Preem is up $255.94. Erik Skopel is up $805.76. Hold your cheering, Matt. And I am up $995.69.
Oh, that's way.
I'm in the red or in the black.
That's way better than I thought I was doing too.
Yeah. So offensively, for our pass catchers or wide receivers, pass catchers, whatever you want to say, Matt, you're up $8. Your biggest gainer was on Trayshawn Holden. Erik, you're minus $14. Your biggest deficit was Jurion Dickey, who has played 2 games and has not caught a pass. So his stock price is Zero. He hasn't done a single thing. And then my biggest gainer was on Trayshawn Holden as well. I gained $22, and then 20 on Troy Franklin.
Yeah, how much should I gain?
Running backs.
Sorry, really quick. How much should I gain on Troy Franklin? Because I know I put a decent amount of stock in that.
Eric, you gained $2.80.
And he's having what's considered the best season in school history. It seems like I should have more than that.
Sorry, yeah, you have $9.82.
Okay.
You bought the Apple stock. It's not going to go up high.
Because you bought.
I understand.
Yeah, you bought 2.87 shares. I did all the math last night of how the money translates to shares and how Matt's shares translated into money. It was a lot. Running back, since
that's my fault.
No, you're good. It was math either way, so we're good. Eric was the only person to buy into running backs, and you gained negative $1.22 because both Noah Whittington and Bucky Irving's stock prices were already very high, and they're performing well. But again, this is about efficiency. They've been good, but not great. So the more games that they've played, the more their stock price goes down. Noah Whittington's. Yeah,
I was just going to ask on Noah. So what is he at now? And that number won't change for the rest of the season, right? That's like I'm locked into whatever his value is because he's not going to play again.
Correct. So his stock price right now is $49.34. You bought 2.98 shares, aka $150 of his original $50.32. So you lost $3 on Noah Whittington because he only played in 3 games and wasn't the best. So
I'll all things considered, I will take just a net negative $3 on Noah, considering I put a lot of money in there. He's not going to play in the high 10 of the games this year. I'll take it.
Probably not. And then defensively, totals. Matt, you made $247.61. Eric, you made $821.17, and I made $954. And this should be an obvious pick, but can anybody guess the player who was a 4-bagger who I mentioned on the original podcast as my 4-bagger?
I'm trying to remember who you said. I haven't listened to that pod in a minute, to be honest.
Who's the player who exploded in their stock
Evan
price
Williams?
value?
Evan was pretty pricey to start with. Bryce Betcher.
We all had him, fellas.
Mateo,
we all said that this was bingo. Yeah, every single one of us said that was the stock price who we felt comfortable that would shoot up. And he did. He went from $2.43 to my objective stock price at the beginning of the year to $22. So,
wow.
That was the biggest one. Matt, you had 5 shares of him, so you gained $97. Eric, you had 30.86 shares of him, so you gained $603 off your initial investment.
Nice.
And I had 41.15 shares of him, so I gained $108 off my initial investment. So that's why
so much.
Yeah,
correct.
We invested it on Microsoft in the ground floor. We were like the first 3 of the first, investors in this blue blood.
Yeah, Kyrie Jackson was another big riser. I think that was another one that we all talked about on the podcast of like, hey, the stock price is low. I think we can do well here. He jumped from $13 basically to $23 a share. So Matt gained $78, but $8. Eric, you gained $55, and I gained $148. So Mateo was the incredible difference maker between having like $100 compared to plus $900 for me and $800 for Eric, plus $255 for you, Matt. Yeah. So that's it. That's all I got.
I didn't think I was going to be in the running, or I was going to be in first place, but I didn't think I was also going to be so far behind. But you guys just bought more Mateo than I did.
And I thought I was going to be doing. I didn't think I was going to be as close to Jared, or I didn't really know who was going to be in first. I just knew I felt great about my investments because of the no investment feeling like a dead end investment. But the fact that I'm actually just going to be slightly in the red on that gives me a little hope for the rest of the season. But the Troy Franklin having statistically like the best start to a season as a receiver in history, and I gained like $9, makes me a little bit more pessimistic about what the rest of the season can hold for that player at least. Because I put like what
Yeah.
250 in that. I think I put a lot into Troy.
No, you put 150.
150. Okay, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, like I put in $300 on Troy.
So we both
Like,
just kind of. It's just
yeah. It's not going to make a huge difference. Like you gained $9.82 and I gained $20 basically. So it's not going to be a giant difference. But if he becomes more productive, which I know is kind of hard to think about, but
yeah, it is.
it's all like divided by games played. And since Troy has played basically every game since his freshman season, like he's got a lot under his belt. Like Tez Johnson, even though he's having a good year this year, like went down in share price because it's all about your effectiveness. Like he literally didn't catch a pass against Stanford last Saturday, so that doesn't help. But some good risers. Obviously, Mateo was the biggest one, and that was kind of obvious. But he still has to be productive because hypothetically he gets hurt, like his stock price isn't going to go up anymore. Which already it's way up, but if he goes 5 games in a row with 3 total tackles, like that's going to start to plummet.
Are we doing our?
I think there's
rebuy.
Oh, I was going to ask, Jared, did we want to do a rebuy or did we just say no on the rebuy? Because last night it sounded like that might be too much work on your end.
I think we scrap that unless Jared says it's totally doable.
Let's just scrap it.
Yeah, I just don't know how we would do it. Like, are we getting rid of a player that we had already purchased or invested into?
I think the idea was like I would obviously, having invested 150 in Noah Whittington, he's not gonna that value is dead. I would sell my $150 of Noah Whittington and then be able to use that 150 on another player. But again, this is getting complicated. Even as I'm saying it, I understand. So we can just scrap that.
Yeah.
Fine,
or we could just throw in and everyone just gets an extra $150. We could buy it into a player we haven't purchased before. But that makes it harder on Jared. But
whatever you guys want.
No, we'll take another look at this at the end of the regular season and then after the postseason, and then just see how things go. And I think we could jump in, and I do think it's worthwhile doing at least 10 minutes on some midseason kind of thoughts and things that have stood out.
I mean, Erik, you don't want to talk about the men's basketball schedule that just got dropped today as well? I mean, holy smokes.
Oh, man, schedule overload.
We'll get to that later. And no, we're not talking about the Oregon men's basketball schedule on this podcast. 5 games in. This is where they should be, right? Like, they're a top 10 team. Their offense is one of the best in the country. And defensively, there's been improvements. Like, this is where they've been. They've played, I would say, 1.5 teams that are on the scale of, I won't say like extremely difficult, but they got tested. The one being Texas Tech and the half being Colorado. You have to acknowledge they are improved, but they're far from where Oregon is at from a level of talent and depth and all of that and skill. But this is where they should be. And they go in, and I don't think the outlook, for me at least, has changed. Like, they're still one of the best teams in the conference. They have a legitimate chance to win the league if they do so, and they do it with only 1 loss or fewer. They should be in the college football playoff. Knowing how good this league is, knowing how good this team is, if they somehow get to the conference championship game with 2 losses, they're probably going to be in a position where they're playing in a New Year's Six Bowl. And that's kind of where at least I envisioned this team being going into the season. One in which they've got the veteran quarterback. The schedule sets up nicely for them to kind of ease in. They should be at the midway point where they are. And I don't really think there's any like overwhelmingly glaring concerns. They've got some like 3rd and long conversions that they've allowed on defense. They've had some issues running the football at times, but I don't think any of these, at least in my opinion, are ones in which it's, wow, man, when they play X school, they are toast because they have no answer for that.
The stats would tell you that Oregon has, and I think this is probably I think, more and more been the case through the first 5 games that Oregon has the most complete team in the Pac-12. Let me just run through, because you mentioned, Matt, having an elite offense. Their defense is statistically almost just as good. Um, here are the stats that matter. I've got 4. I'm going to run through an offense, defense, scoring offense. Oregon is second nationally, only behind USC, 51.6 points per game. They've scored the second most touchdowns. They've scored 34. They are second nationally in yards per game with 557.8, and fourth nationally in yards per play with 8.1. Defensively, they are eighth nationally in scoring defense, 11.8 points per game. They've allowed the ninth fewest touchdowns with 7. They are seventh nationally in yards per game allowed with 255.6, and they are third nationally in yards per play allowed with 4.0. It's a defense that is starting to look like a top 10 defense. Like, if you run through those numbers, and again, they're going to get into the meat of their schedule and be tested, and these numbers are probably going to be there's going to be certainly strain put on this defense to the place where I don't know if they'll be top 10 for the totality of the season. I'd probably bet against it, but still, through the 5 games, as Matt said, they're taking care of business, and statistically, at least, the defense is playing, I think, further ahead of where I thought they'd be. To be, eighth nationally in scoring defense, seventh nationally in total defense, and if you want to be specific about pass defense, like, they're eighth nationally in pass yards per game and third in yards per attempt. I mean, Oregon has played Colorado and Hawaii, who are 2 of the more prolific passing offenses. So there are some benchmarks here early in the season that are really impressive. Another one is sacks, where a year ago we know that they were terrible at that. Well, they've had 18 sacks so far this season, which is 8th nationally. So there's just a bunch of data here that I was going through when I was doing my "How does Oregon stack up on both sides of the ball" stories this week, where I went, man, this is like maybe even a little better than we've given credit to in terms of just how they stack up nationally across the board, and really almost every category. Like, Matt, you brought up third down defense, and third down and long in particular. Even Dan said was not great. Well, last year they were in the 90s in terms of where they ranked nationally, and right now they're 30th in third down defense. So big improvements really just across the board. Again, a whole lot more of the season to play, a lot of bigger tests upcoming, but all of this is super encouraging.
Yeah, and that's the perfect word for it, is encouraging, because there was a lot of question marks going into the season about A, how this defense would look, like B, like where are they going to improve, and C, like would the transfer portal additions and the recruiting class, like would those guys end up stepping in and performing? And they've answered all of those questions on the regular during this 5-game winning streak to start the season. Like, the biggest scare came against Texas Tech. And, outside of Tyler Shuck's 58-yard run and some genuinely boneheaded defensive plays for pass interference, like Kyrie Jackson or Brandon Dorlus taking out Tyler Shuck as he's running out of bounds, like, there's a lot of those moments that Texas Tech had that sustained a drive that could have been eliminated just by playing smart. And that's obviously what Dan has been preaching for the last couple of weeks with the defensive penalties, but that was still a good performance. They still turned Texas Tech over 4 times, really 3, but like the last one in the end zone, like, it counts, but it's a Hail Mary, so it is what it is. But three turnovers, a bunch of sacks, even like a forced fumble that Shuck did recover. Like, that was the beginning of, like, oh, this defense is much faster, which I remember I talked about, like, after the Portland State game. I'm like, this defense is way faster than it was last season. But then you really saw it against Texas Tech, and then you've begun to see it every week since, and just perimeter tackling, getting to the ball quicker, getting multiple hats on the ball quicker, blitzes, exotic blitzes from their linebackers, I think is just so much better than where it was last year, because Jamal Hill and Jeffrey Bassa are literally just faster than A, they were a season ago, and B, faster than Noah Sewell, who was great at running in a straight line and using his brute strength. But the way Dan's defense and Tosh's defense likes to work is have these guys come in on simulated pressures and either get to the quarterback or drop back into coverage. They can do that this year. And then they add Evan Williams, and then they add Tysheem Johnson, and then they add Kyrie Jackson, who's been marvelous on the corner and becoming a shutdown, lockdown defender, like Christian Gonzalez was last season. But that's been the biggest step up in this team. Like, we all knew the offense was going to be good. I don't think we had any questions about that. Just maybe how Will Stein looked like as a play caller, but he's been great. So that has gone out the wayside. Like every game you go into, you're not really worrying about Oregon's offense. There's still probably like a little bit of worry about the defense, maybe because they just hadn't played anybody, but they've played people and they played them well. And Hawaii will still put up numbers against a regular Power 5 team, and Oregon completely shut them down. Colorado 41-42 against USC last week. Oregon held them to 6. And then Stanford, they put up, I know they only put up 10 against USC, but they put up 21 or 20 against Arizona. Like Oregon held them to 6. And granted, that's not a good offense, but Oregon did their job. They held them to 6. They bent a little bit, never really broke. So I think that's the biggest revelation of the season so far. But the writing was on the wall preseason with the people that they brought in, and both coordinators and actual player personnel. But you just didn't know until you saw it. And now we're seeing it. And now we're seeing what Dan's vision was last year when he just didn't have the guys.
So going into the year, I think Erik and I both predicted 1 loss. Jared predicted 2. Has that changed at all? I've changed my loss. And I'm actually going to change my loss. It was Utah on the road. I don't think they're going to lose that game, because even if Cam Rising returns, and Cam Rising is 100% what he was, before injury.
Sure.
That team has so many other issues, so many other injuries.
So many injuries
around him that I don't think it's going to matter. I think Oregon's the better team. That's not going to say it's going to be a blowout, but Oregon should win that game on the road. And I originally shifted it to a loss at UW. I'm going to, maybe spoiler here, pick Oregon to win that game. I think if they lose a game, it's going to be at home to USC. I think Caleb Williams and his running could be a big factor in that game. Michael Penix isn't a runner. He doesn't choose to run. Caleb Williams doesn't choose to run either, but his escapability and his athletic ability is really impressive. And he's the best player in college football. And he's a Heisman winner from last season. And I just think if they're going to lose a game, it feels like that's going to be the one for me.
The argument for why Utah is still not a bad pick is, they have to have Rising back, and Matt is right, and I even said it. So many injuries. I mean, Matt and I were watching the game with Oregon State last week, and 2 brothers got significantly injured. One's out for the season in like a 10-minute span of real time. It was just a tough day, and they've got a lot of other injury issues as well. But the argument for that would be, it is the 3rd consecutive tough opponent there, and you play Washington, you play Washington State, and then you go on the road at Utah. That could just be we are worn out from playing 2 really good teams the weeks before. But I agree that Utah feels a little less scary than they did in the preseason. I'm still sticking with my 1 loss and it being the game coming up soon, but I feel a lot more comfortable with where Oregon is especially after the last couple of weeks of conference play, honestly. Not that Washington played bad at all against Cal, but Oregon really took care of business in its 2 games. And I was just surprised a little bit with Arizona, with its backup quarterback kind of hanging with the Dogs. I don't think that game was ever going to be won by Arizona, but it was a 7-point game, final score. It was pretty competitive throughout. So not that I'm changing my pick, because like I said, I'm going to stick with it, I think. But we'll get through next week. Maybe I'll change my mind. But I still think that's the biggest glaring. Because I look at USC and think that game's at home. Caleb Williams is amazing. But that defense has really sort of struggled against teams that I don't think are awesome offenses. So we'll see how these teams play out. But I still think Washington's the biggest test on the schedule.
Yeah, I'm sticking with my 10-2, which I have losses to Utah at Utah and USC at home. I don't really want to change my predictions during the season. This is what I thought preseason. I'm just going to stick with it. I'm going to be stubborn and not change it. And I predicted a win against Washington in the beginning of the season. I feel pretty good about that. Again, it all comes down to if Oregon can stop Michael Penix and force some turnovers there, which we'll find out, because they haven't been a great turnover force defense, but it's also sometimes it's kind of just luck. Sometimes it's just opportunities or drop interceptions. Like it just kind of happens. It comes in bunches. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
they had 4 in one game and have done nothing since, basically. Yeah.
Right. And again, like Jamal Hill could have caught the interception against Colorado. Like Kyrie Jackson had a chance. And so sometimes it's kind of just luck, but we'll see how that game goes. The Utah one, I completely understand where you guys are at on Utah. I tend to agree. I am just never going to underestimate Utah again. I got burned on that during the 2021 season. And until an Oregon program can show me that they're going to go there and absolutely maul Utah, like they did in 2019, I guess, during the Pac-12 championship game, Utah is going to be an incredibly difficult environment. Might be one of the toughest in the Pac-12. And then USC, I'm with you guys. Defense is not there. It clearly isn't. It never has been under Lincoln Riley. For some reason, he keeps hiring Alex Grinch. Like, I don't know what the reason is like why he keeps hiring him. He must have like dirt on him or owe him money or something like that. But it's not going to stop Oregon's offense. Unless the Ducks have significant injuries on the offensive line from now until then, which may happen, it may not happen, knock on wood. But it's going to be a long night at the office for both defenses because, like Matt went through, Caleb Williams is that dude. I remember we saw a thread on our message board the day of the Colorado game, like, is Caleb Williams overrated? It's like, no, he's not. He's the best player in the country. He's going to be the number 1 overall pick. And if I were like 8 to 10 NFL teams, I would rather have him than my current quarterback, which includes my New England Patriots, because I'd much rather have Caleb Williams and his arm strength to try to move the ball down the field. Like he's that good. He's a generational talent, and he'll be gone after this year, so he won't get to leave his imprint on the first year in the Big Ten. But that's going to be incredibly difficult. Like for all the high praise that we're going to be singing about Michael Penix that we have in the past and what we're going to do this week, Caleb Williams is just better quarterback. And not that any of them are the wrong answer here, but Caleb Williams is just better. So it's going to be a difficult day at the office. I do really like Oregon, though, against that team. While their wide receiver core is good, they've had way better ones in the past, like true number 1 guys. I feel like they have a lot of number 2s, which again isn't bad. Like I'd take an offense that had 7 number 2s in it, but they've had real dudes in the past, like even just Jordan Addison last season. So I like where Oregon is going. It's honestly going to depend a lot on how they perform against Washington. It's going to be their first giant test of the season. They're going to have 3 more giant tests, 4 more giant tests towards the end of the season. We're just going to find out what this team is truly made of. But I am incredibly excited for this Washington game.
I'm the more optimistic of the 3. And I think
yes,
I lean towards Oregon going undefeated more than I do a loss. But the fact that it's never happened before in league, I can't pick one. Like I can't say they're going to do it, especially in this season.
It has to happen once.
Yeah, so like that's why I said they have to have a loss somewhere, and I picked USC. I think they're going to beat Washington. I think they're the more balanced team. I think Oregon has dominated the games in which, the same kind of caliber of game that Washington hasn't. It is on the road, so maybe that changes things. That place is one of the more difficult places to play in the country when Washington is good, and it's a rivalry game up there. I just think Oregon's more balanced, and that will help there. So I had to pick somebody. I don't think they're going to lose at Utah. Maybe they trip up somewhere. Maybe it's
Washington State.
Maybe it's Washington State, or maybe the Desert sneaks up and snatches the Ducks again, like they did in 2019, which would be a monumental upset this season. But because Jared, the reason why I brought this up was when Jared was going through the USC stuff. It's like, yeah, I agree with all of that. And then I think Oregon's the more balanced team in that matchup too. But they have the best player on the field in Caleb Williams. But I think the best way I could summarize this is like wouldn't be shocked if Oregon won every single one of their games the rest of the way. Like when you just look at them individually, just not. Hey, I'm not shocked that they go undefeated, but Oregon at Washington, Oregon wins that. Yeah, that's not a surprise. Oregon at home against Washington State, they win that. Yeah, that's not a surprise. You go through the entire list, and I feel like that would be the same response. Like I would be really surprised if they're underdogs by more than 2 points, 3 points the rest of the way.
I mean, this will probably be the only week where they are more than that potentially against Washington, because I think against Utah, Oregon will probably be close to even, if not maybe even favored, depending on how Utah plays from now until then. USC at home, I would expect they're favored. I'm with you, Matt, in terms of, I think that's a good way of putting it. Of if you look at each of these tough games individually, like, I totally see a path to winning all those games. I think Oregon's outperformed. I think Oregon has played so far through 5 games probably the best football across the board. I'm not saying they have the best offense. I'm not saying they've had the best defense, but combining offense and defense and special teams in all facets and how they've dominated, I think you could make a really strong case that Oregon has performed better than anyone else in this conference, and that you could look at the schedule and say they can beat every single one of these teams individually. I just think the way that college football works and the cumulative nature of all of this, they play 3 really good teams in a row right out of the bye. If they come out of that 3-0, the undefeated path becomes much, much more clear to me. Because after that, it's USC and Oregon State that are real tests. They get Cal, which should be a home game where, Justin Wilcox has played Oregon tough traditionally, but that should be a game where you can win pretty comfortably. And then we've already talked about Kenny Dillingham down in Tempe. That's a game you should win. So, I mean, it's an interesting place to be, where you look up and say there's 5 ranked teams over the course of the last 7 weeks. And you go, there's a path where Oregon could absolutely win every one of those games, but I just have watched enough college football, had enough seasons where Oregon has been in this spot before and they dropped one. So it's hard for me to foresee them actually maneuvering all the way through and being undefeated. Like Matt, I could totally see it happening. I'm not going to count it out. And if they do, they will be in the college football playoff and maybe one of the top 2 seeds, perhaps, depending upon what happens across the country. But that's going to take a lot of stuff breaking right.
Yeah, it sure would. I would be sorry for being the negative Nelly on the show. That's just who I am. I would be incredibly surprised if they went undefeated, just because not only has Oregon been in this position before and dropped a game like college football teams do, it's incredibly difficult to go undefeated. This year's Pac-12 is way better than in recent years, like just straight up. Even going down to ASU against Kenny Dillingham, like they gave USC a good little fight. Granted, USC's defense isn't great, but you expect Kenny Dillingham to not be incredibly competitive against the team that he used to coach? Good luck. And that's not even talking about Oregon State at the end of the year. I'm even talking about Utah or USC. Like, this is an incredibly difficult schedule.
Yeah.
And if you go 3-0 in the next 3 weeks, the undefeated path gets there. But guess what? You still have to play USC, who at that time could also be undefeated. Maybe they show the world how their defense really is next week when they play Notre Dame. That'll be a great game. We'll all kind of find out if they're for real or not in that game. Maybe they lose. Maybe they get their asses handed to them and we just write them off immediately. But even still, that game's going to be incredibly difficult. And then you got Oregon State to end the season. So I am less optimistic, as I always am. I'm always more realistic, and at least realistic to my thoughts. And I would just be stunned of an undefeated season in the last year of the Pac-12, which is, again, an 9-game conference schedule, undefeated season has never happened. And with the incredible talent this league has assembled in its dying breath, I would be even more surprised that a team does it this year.
Yeah, just be clear. I don't think I said I would be not shocked that they went undefeated. I would be shocked as well, because I picked the game when I'm saying, like, individually I think they're going to win each one, but I know it's not. That doesn't happen. This is college football. Losses happen, and so I had to pick one. I just feel like individually they should go into every game feeling like they should. It shouldn't be a surprise at all that they win. But as Jared's pointed out, as we've seen in past history, it happens every single year. An unexpected loss or a tough loss that you had in your grips slips away. It's gonna be an exciting finish to this second half of the football season. There's a lot of big games starting next week at Washington. We'll all be there, and then at home against Washington State, and then you go back on the road at Utah, and it just gets harder and harder and harder. We'll be there covering it all the way through, and we'll be on duckterritory.com with previews, recaps, and game updates as well. And as always on this podcast as well, we'll have stuff throughout the week. Until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.